Dave, do you want to just mention an update on classes?
Yeah, let me grab it. So, planning an online class. This time we're going to give this a try. I think it should work pretty well. The idea is that people will have a couple of days to view each chapter's lecture, and then we'll have a Q&A session to go over things every couple of days. So less drinking from a fire hose than it used to be, and hopefully it'll be more convenient for people. So what I've currently got planned is to begin October 20th with the tech class. That'll just be an introduction. That's Friday night. We'll just introduce each other, talk about the class and how it'll work. And then it just goes from there over the next couple of weeks with an exam session then. Let's see. Yeah, exam on November 4th, which is a Saturday. That'd be at Beckwith and Cuffle. That's Jim's work site. Kindly offered that venue, so we have a physical location for people to come and take the exam. And then starting right after that will be a general class. So if you'd like, you could do tech immediately followed by general, or just jump in at the general if you already have a tech license. And it'd be the same thing there, a couple of weeks worth of going over material. And then the exam would be on Sunday, November 19th at Beckwith and Cuffle again. So that's the current plan. If anybody wants more details, I have, the schedule right here. We'll put it on the website, get it advertised and see how it goes. I think it should work pretty well. I'm excited to try it. It's great.
And Dave, you'll be using the ARRL manuals?
Yes. Yes, the ARRL license manuals, that's the full size book. The class is structured off of that. I literally put the lectures in the exact same order that the material comes up in the book, but then I embellish quite a bit and explain and try to make things conceptually, more simple. So I strongly recommend getting the book. They also come in a Kindle version. You could probably find it in the library.
So anyone here contemplating either the general class since you all have the text? All right, I better. Great. All right. Great. All right. So I think we have capacity. How many basically? Can you just say, what did Jim say about the numbers of people that venue?
So 12 for sure, although there's a wrinkle in that the classroom is actually going to be undergoing construction. But there's a downstairs that's bigger. We just have to set up enough tables and chairs. I bet we could get 20 people in there. I need to talk more with Jim about that.
And that would be for testing session primarily.
That's the testing section. Yeah, right. Okay. The class size, well, I'd rather not have it be too large because then it's hard to get questions answered. Theoretically, we could accommodate, say, 20 or 30 people, but we're limited on size in terms of the test sessions. What I would suggest is that we limit the class size initially to that. If some latecomers really want to take the class, I would say go ahead, but we won't be able to take the test on that day. We could maybe a couple weeks after that.
So 20, you're capping at 20.
So 20, I think, is going to be the answer. I need to talk more with Jim about that.
Okay. So, the reason why I'm asking that is because for all of us, if you can get word out, right now we probably have, I think Jim said he already had 4.
Yeah.
Right, so that's 8. There may be some others we're not aware of, so that's 10-ish, let's say. So we have 10 more spots that we could fill. So if you know anybody that wants to do tech or general, they'll get word out. It's on our website as well, so there's more information. Yeah, go ahead.
How many sections are you going to do the class in?
So there are, let's see, 8 chapters. The first chapter doesn't have any questions associated with it, so it's really chapters 2 through 9. And the way I'm structuring it is every couple of days we'll do a chapter. It's a little more compressed on the weekends when people have more time. I think the idea was, I was gonna do 2 chapters over the weekend, basically, so that the timing works out. But that's basically how it goes. Every couple of days we'll have a Q&A session. And I'm happy to answer questions by email or phone or whatever. If there's some burning question you have, that's fine.
Are there, so is it a lecture or is it basically like we will be expected to read it and then there'll just be a
There'll be a lecture. I need to get them online, the new ones. There are old lectures online. If you go there now, those are based on the questions from 4 years ago. The previous set of questions, but the question pool has changed, so I need to update the lectures to reflect the new questions. So don't go on there just yet.
Where's there?
The website, the club's website, the West Seattle Amateur Radio Club. If you go to the education section, you can find the lectures at the bottom. But again, those are the old ones. They'll be very similar to the new ones, but I just need to update the questions and what specifically they're emphasizing with the new set of questions.
And do we need to sign up somewhere?
Yeah, so there'll be a sign up. It's over something called John Form. John, who runs our website, has got that all figured out. So we'll make that available again. That you'll be able to find that information on the website, where to go to register, and then that's how you do it.
Okay, so WSARC.org, for those that aren't familiar. So go there, you'll find the education link, and John will set that up. And the registration, I think, will be key soon.
Yeah.
So, are you going to follow up with John to see when that's ready?
Yeah, well, I told John, I was just on vacation this last week, so I've been a little out of the loop. But I told John a week ago, I think, the flyers that I created and all of this are ready to go as far as I can tell. So you may have it there already. I just need to touch bases with them.
Okay, right. So, any other comments or questions or any other topics before we transition? Is there for the class?
No, there's not. The class is free. The exam is, if I remember right, it's $15. Yeah, $15. That goes to the ARRL for their administrative, costs. And as of the last year or so, there's a $35 fee, for the FCC for your license. Now, children under 18 can do the whole thing for $5. The ARRL has a special program where they'll pay for all of that. They don't charge the $15. They'll actually cover the cost of the license. Anybody under 18 is interested. The whole cost would be only $5. Great.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So in the interest of time, what I wanted, it's 10:15. What I'd like to propose that who brought Go Box or kits that you could do a brief show and tell, just to kind of point out features or whatever's in that. Who has something to show? Okay, so Ron, Cindy, yes, okay, Ron, and right. Okay, so why don't we? Do you think you have 5 minutes or? Okay, quick. 10
Less than 5.
5. Okay. So why don't we start with one of you to do that, and then that'll get us pretty close. There's going to be questions or whatever. That'll get us to 10:30. And Dave, all the things that you want to introduce and talk about, how much time do you think we need to do that?
Well, I've got a lot to cover, probably an hour.
Okay. So that'll put us at 11. Okay. So let's do that. And I actually asked Brian to come back at 11:30-ish. Right. So that may be a good time for us to wrap up. Okay. And the last thing I just want to mention, Barry, thank you for bringing the donation of what could be a Go Box, that suitcase handle contraption. I don't have the tickets today for the typical raffle that we have, so I think what I'm gonna do, I'll take the box. All right, right? And if you don't see me again, or if you see this up on eBay, but I'll bring it back and then we'll do a raffle. I just want to say as an aside that it may also be well suited as a club radio box, because we have, I don't know if we actually have a kit for our gear. Oh, it's already in the company, so maybe we don't, but one way or the other, we'll raffle it and everybody will have a chance to win that as a club box. And then Frank, you've got coils. Do you know how long these are? Oh, around 100 feet. 100 feet each. Right. Okay. So there's that. And I think that's about it. So why don't we, anything else before we get to it?
Connectors, I believe, are all silver plate. There's some steel 259s and some of them are in.
Those are just up for grabs. Those are just up for grabs.
Yeah. Help to go.
Great. Okay. Okay. All right. So if nothing else, let's now transition. And Tom, why don't you go first? And if you could just tell us about what you have, and then Ron will go with you.
Start with this thing that I kind of put together a few years ago. This is my VHF UHF film kit. Got a lot of pieces in here. Got a battery, float charger, has an AC outlet over here. Signal link, so I can do data stuff. I have a USB cable. I usually have a little HP mini, which is currently running my mesh. Regular old ICOM, dual band mobile here. Magnet antenna. I got this on here just like holding it on the electronic side, but it's no antennas over here. Quarter wave on 2 meter, 3/4 wave on 70 centimeters. So it's basically a dual band antenna. And I just stick that on either a cookie sheet or refrigerator or whatever that. Give a ground plane, and then flip on the radio. I got a little power distribution unit in here that's got a USB charger port. I can plug a phone into it. All the power poles. Right now my battery's only at 12 volts because I just stuck this one in here. My other one was only 11, so I figured the battery died. Even though I keep it plugged in all the time. And then turn on the radio, dual band radio. Like I said, signal link if I wanted to do digital modes. And I just basically keep this thing plugged in under my bed, ready to roll it in the phone.
Kind of battery.
It's just a gel cell. This one happens to be a Sigma's Tech, but they're all pretty much the same. I think there's only like one factory that makes this one happens to be a 7.5 amp hour. This box and this battery and charger, not this physical, this specific battery, but I want to just make it started out as a project for the police department. Yeah, so they funded the case and the charger. So thank them for that. And then once that project kind of just fell by the wayside, rather than throw the stuff in the trash, I said, well, that makes it go okay. I'll just repurpose those case and whatnot. Like I said, I normally keep it plugged into the AC and it's just sitting under my bed. But if I'm traveling or something, just unplug it, throw it in the trunk of the car, and it's just a standard computer cable. So,
Is this the same one you used at Fauntleroy Church that one time?
yes, we did
I
that.
can attest that this is a very good system.
Then I've got extra stuff like just other connections.
What's the amp hour on the battery?
7.5.
And that's sufficient for hours.
For receiving, yeah, probably all day.
Yeah.
But transmitting, I probably get 3 or 4 hours out of that thing. And then I don't have it in here now, but I do have another cigarette lighter cable. And I have a cigarette lighter cable. I can plug this into the car cigarette lighter. It's in another kit right now. So I can run all this off of the car. If I need to, if this battery goes down.
Did you already describe that junction box, that distributor?
Yeah, this is just basically a fuse block that you can get. It's got fuses for each individual power pole. It's got a voltmeter on, so as you can see, my battery's already going down because I haven't charged this one yet. A USB port, so you can plug a phone into it to charge your phone. And I just got, typical little rig battery.
Now that used to be a N9 JEB product.
Yeah, and they also make another one that sits right on top of the gel cell that I have at home that I'll probably be using with this kit. So it's got like USB ports and power poles and stuff, and it sits right on top of the battery, plugs right into the batteries. Integrated right in the battery. And I picked up that kit at one of the summer gathering digital meetings up at North Bend. And that's proved to be very handy.
So I use the same product and it's fused and all the things that Tom mentioned. It's really, now the guy that offered that kit doesn't offer them anymore, but you can get those products and it's actually a nice thing to have in your Go kit because you can power one and have multiple power pole sources.
And the nice thing is, I believe if the fuse blows, the light comes on. And
Yeah.
something's plugged into it, so you say, "Oh, that light's on." Or
Yep.
it's the opposite. If there's something plugged in and the light's on, then the fuse is good.
Green to red.
I'll have to remember.
Yeah.
But
Dave, you're gonna say? Were you gonna say
Oh,
something?
yeah, I was gonna add, just notice the fuse on the positive lead of the battery.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Yep.
In fact, that's very important.
always have a fuse at your power source. In your car, if you put a radio in your car, if you run the power cable through the firewall, put the battery at the battery, or the fuse at the battery, not at the radio. That protects the wire all the way to the battery. A lot of guys, fuses are like right at the back of the radio, and then run the cable over the battery, and the wire's not protected.
Right.
My other, this is VHF and UHF, and this little switch here is because this radio does not put the audio, the transmit audio on the same pin. The receive audio comes out the same pin for transmit and receive, but for the signal link, I have to switch it between the 2 meter band and the 70 centimeter band, whichever band I happen to be using is because it's a dual band. They're basically two separate transmitters. That's what the only 10. Antenna's over here, money.
That's your USB cable antenna.
I have it on 14563 and that's Columbia Tower. That's on 44455. Yeah. That's Columbia Tower. How far is that? It's about like 7 miles away from here. Yeah. To a building.
73.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Right. Well, thanks, Tom. And
And
what do you
just
got going?
recently,
Yeah.
as a door prize at CPAC, won this nice little Elecraft KX2 HF portable transceiver. The bag for it just showed up Thursday. So I'm in the process now of getting this all going as a field kit. So I'll have HF as well. It's 80 through 10 meters. It's only 10 watts, but one's on an internal battery or it's got a cable. You can plug it into a power pole. Or it's got a charger in here and you plug it in.
And your antenna kits.
The antenna, and this is a end-fed 40 meter. And this little coil added to it makes it tune up on 40, 20, 15, and 10 meter. And it's got a built-in antenna tuner, so you just have to be close and it'll bring it right in for you.
So K6ARK
K6ARK makes the little Balun kit. And you can
on
make this,
Amazon.
this can either be a Balun or an unowned. The Balun would be a 1-to-1 for like a center fed dipole, or you can make it a 9-to-1 for off center fed, or in this case, it's a 49-to-1 for an end fed. And it's about 66 feet of wire to resonate on 40 meters. And like I say, it'll tune on 20, 15, 10 as well.
So just as an aside, a couple of years ago, and the prices have gone up a bit, but I bought a 21-foot telescopic fishing pole off of eBay for $3. All right, and it's great. And the very tip of that fishing pole is too weak, so you collapse it into the next section and glue it, and it stiffens it so that it can hold weight of antenna load. My point being is that if you go to eBay, they're not going to be $3 anymore. They may be $12, but still you could easily have a lightweight fishing pole to support your antennas.
Elecraft does make a telescoping antenna. They'll do 20 through 10, and then you can add a living coil to make it work on 40. That'll connect directly to it. There's a little microphone built in here and a push to talk about. You can use this as a walkie-talkie. So
That's very cool.
So you can 20 meter SSB walking down the beach on that problem. Let's see it.
Right.
And we'll get a news probably.
Great. So any questions before we transition to Ron? Great. Well, thanks, Tom. That's great. Okay, so Ron, what do you got going?
I've got a 2 meter 440. No, that's okay. I don't need to be seen. I have a 2 meter 440. This is an emergency radio. So you didn't hear it from me, but it's multi-service capable within the radio. It's a ICOM 208H radio that is open for Mars and shares. So
Why didn't we hear from you?
we didn't hear it from you because it's illegal to have different services on the same radio. This primarily is our GMRS hub emergency base radio station, but it also does 2 meter just fine. The workings are inside here. I should have thought and taken the cover off, but it has a fuse panel in the side, not like the fancy one that Tom has. It has a charger. It has 2 gel cell batteries, each of them 8 amp hours per. So 16 amp hours worth of gel cell battery. So a pretty good operating time period during the daytime, which is primarily when the hubs would be in operation. So it'll probably last the entire day and just be charging overnight. It's got the latest and greatest code plug from ACS. And then on the side over here, I'm gonna step over in front of you, Jonathan. This is an AC input port where you can plug in an AC cord to the wall and it will automatically charge the batteries until the batteries are full. And then it just runs the inverter inside the power supply for the radio and saves the power on the battery. So that you don't run off the battery all the time. It's an internal switch. You can also plug in a cigarette lighter to a 12-volt input if you're in the car. And then this has room for expansion. The case was built originally for the US Coast Guard. So they wanted a marine radio and marine HF capable on the outside. So there's another hole that's not being used. But I opted for just the 2 meter 440. So just one antenna output on the outside, and it's coupled to the radio. The radio head is here on top, of the works are down inside underneath, mounted to the case. So essentially, that's it. Power supply.
Nice.
If I had the antenna or the battery connections plugged in, if you leave a battery connected on this unit, it has a phantom draw and it draws the batteries all the way down. So I leave them unplugged and plug them in when I go to use the radio. So the batteries are fully charged, but they're currently unplugged. That's all there is, pending your questions.
How much does that weigh?
It's pretty heavy with 2 batteries. I tried using LiPo batteries, but if you come closer, you'll find out what happened when we used the charging system with LiPo batteries. It didn't match up very well and it burnt the batteries. So you can smell
I can smell it, yeah.
and that was 2 years ago.
Were those LiPos or just lithium-ion?
They were LiPo batteries. They didn't like, because I didn't use the right charger for them.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a second case that's currently at one of our net controllers' houses. So I have 2 of these. They're exactly the same.
So where did you source those?
Out of a company in Florida called Radio Technology. I saw them up at IWCE, International Wireless Communications Expo, and they had the marine equivalent together. And so I said, well, geez, maybe I should get one of these for our hubs. And turns out that it was quite expensive, $4,500 each. So, but I bought them over time, right? So it wasn't a big hit. Tax returns helped.
Did you say 4,500 each?
Yeah, it's because we're
Wow.
professionally designed and built.
Wow. Okay.
Is that for the whole kit? Or is
That's
it-
for the whole kit. Batteries, antenna, cables, radio,
Okay.
everything, all of it.
Does it have radios built in or is that a radio less?
The radio is underneath this panel here, underneath the head. The antenna is connected by coax to the back of the radio.
So this does not require radios?
No, it does not. No, not with UHF and VHF especially. Just a standard stick like you'd have on your handheld radio. You have a question?
Something, they're getting dizzy.
Okay, I'm pointing at something. No question? That's it?
That's great. Well, thank you, Ron. Was there another case against the window there?
Oh, yeah, that's just my really quick. It's called the Lixan radio. It's got an internal battery. This is even quicker to operate. That's the radio. It's the head of the radio. Now maybe you should do that because
Okay.
I need both hands.
I will do it.
Flip around.
Oh. Hey,
This is the model. It's VV, not W. VV898. This is upside down. SP. And within this box is a radio, it's a 2-meter 440 dual band. And right now, if I put the antenna on it, which
I got a question. I'm online.
oh, we have an online question coming in. Yes, go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm outside trying to get inside the building, but I don't know how.
Oh.
Where's your secret entrance?
All right, where somebody's going out right now.
normal
You'll-
side door.
Yeah, you'll see it on the side door by the sidewalk.
By the sidewalk. Okay.
These were
I'm
not
good.
as expensive, but those, these, I think, the price, less than $100 for the radius.
2-meter 440.
2-meter 440, very quick to set up. Internal battery, plug in 12-volt DC here through a wall wart, and it plugs in there. And it has an internal fan if you get operating a lot.
Right.
You can hear the fan.
Nice.
We have several of these that one's in a Pelican case, but he put a couple of them in soft side, so that we can hand them out.
That's in your bag.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
during the activation. Well, and Bill Tomlinson's got it too. He's the one who originally found this one. It's just super all purpose.
Well, the radio, the case and everything, probably on the heavy side of 12, maybe.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Any other questions before we transition to Dave? Okay, so let's, Dave, if you want to get ready and you will, Okay. Yeah. That's great. Bring up chairs. And I'll give this back to you. Ron.
Less than that, thank you. We're still on record. I want to find my coffee. And then I'm going to move my coffee and myself up front.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, you know, I have to leave before everything's done. There's some to-go trays that Nancy provides, so take it all and then Ron will pack it up and move out what's left.
That's very.
Available?
Yeah. All right, we're ready to start here. Okay, so before we get going on the actual talk, I was just in Europe with Meredith for 3 weeks. In Southern Europe, and it was a fantastic trip, so wanted to just show you a couple of pictures. So this is a nice shot in Italy, somewhere between Naples and Sorrento, kind of near Pompeii. Really nice antennas there, and they use antennas for their Wi-Fi, not on cable. There's a whole bunch of antennas. Other antenna. Isn't Italy beautiful? This was an interesting one with the helical antenna. When they right on there. Here's a nice shot of Claire and Meredith, and Claire's fiance Oshkai. There's Meredith. But the antenna, the requisite antenna back there. There's nice shot of Oshkai there.
All of your family photos have antennas.
Yes. I purpose was torturing them. I'm picking, I gotta get some funny pictures to show them what. You know, the girls are holding the guys up. They're, yeah. You have a nice shot of Claire there. So there were some amazing things we got to see too. This was made by the Olympia. This is the original Olympic Stadium. 700 something BC. They let people down on there. I sprinted down the length of it for fun. That was really cool.
And I also mentioned that they had them run naked.
Yes, I did not do that. I thought about it. And the Acropolis, the Parthenon. So the next thing I was going to talk about, as you know, water ingress can be a problem, especially with a Go kit. Water damage is always something we need to think about. So my brothers and my dad and I just went on a really nice trip to the Southwest. Unfortunately, my brother left the water running in his apartment by mistake. And when he got back, well, this is what the apartment complex looked like when he got back. So this is Bryce again. Named after Ebenezer Canyon. Was it Bryce? Okay, so let's get going here. What's that? No, that was Bryce Canyon. We didn't get to Zion. I imagine it looks similar. We also went to Arches and Canyonlands and one. Okay, so. That was an extra slide. This is based off last lectures. Last slide. So what is a Go kit? Well, basically a kit with all the radio components, battery, everything in a kit that you can grab and go. And literally be as simple as this. Grab your HT and run. Okay, it doesn't have to be a complicated thing. Taking it a step further, you can put it in a bag with, you know, an HT charger, extra battery, microphone, you know, earpiece, car adapter, you know, all your doodads, manuals, can simply go in a bag. I brought that bag there. I discovered traveling in Europe that bags like this, they're backpacks that designed, you know, with a form factor that's basically like a suitcase, actually works really well. I went to Europe for 3.5 weeks, and that's the only bag I have with me. I got it under 8 kilos, so it could go on the airplane, and it works. And I was just amazed, like when your hands are free, pull out your passport, credit cards, shake hands, pull out your camera, your hands are free. This was a super way to travel, and so it makes me wonder, is it worthwhile to build a Go kit? You know, something like that, a backpack, or something to think about. There's a list of things that you could put in a Go kit. This particular list added up to $590. Of course, if you go with Baofeng, it would be a lot cheaper. Not as robust, and not as many features, but certainly would work. Yeah.
Are you gonna share these slides? Can we
Yeah,
get these
I'm
somewhere?
gonna put the whole thing on the website.
Thanks.
And it's also on video.
I might redo the talk as well at home, perhaps, so we'll see. You know, Ron's thing there, you can hear, maybe that'll be good enough. But I'll put the PowerPoint on there too. So the next idea is, okay, they make harnesses specifically for radios. And I thought, well, okay, how about something like this, a fishing vest, so I went ahead and purchased this. Thinking maybe this is a good idea, you know, the Holden HT. You know, it fits pretty well. Discovered these pockets are actually pretty big. These are just FRS radios. I can get 2 of them in one pocket. I can that mid-sized battery there also fits in a pocket. My handheld can go here, but you can put a microphone up here, you know, and so on. This seems like not a bad idea. I specifically picked this one because it has reflective tape on it, so drivers can see you at night. And it's like $60. It wasn't really that expensive. It actually seemed like a nice idea. You could put a logo on the back. You know, if you like, you know, get creative. I would actually recommend that. I purposely picked something that wasn't, you know, camouflage colored. I think it's a good idea to put some sort of a logo on there because during an event, you know, you don't want people worrying about you. Some guy wearing a vest, talking on a radio. You don't want people thinking that you might be a terrorist or, you know, G.I. Joe vigilante or something. To identify who you are, I think that's helpful. Just with the on. Then you can take it to the next level, and that's what we're really talking about here. With the financial Go Box. This is one I found online that seems like a nice one. This is the 4th iteration of it. You can see, you know, I was selected it very similar to what you've seen already. And then here's what the, you know, the front surface down. So the first step you'll want to do is think about, okay, what do you want in your Go? Is a handheld good enough? Mobile, probably not a base station. Or some combination of radios. And there are trade-offs, of course, with functionality, weight, power consumption, with all of that. Are you interested in HF, or is it just going to be VHF, UHF, or both? Do you want to think about that, or do you want to do QRP, in other words, low power stuff, in which case your battery will last a lot longer? Digital modes, do you want to include that? You're going to need a computer for digital things like that. Maybe a signal link, like in Tom's Go kit. Some radios have that circuitry already built in. So you don't necessarily have to have a signal link, it just depends on the radio that you use. One thing I would emphasize is handhelds are very power efficient. Any QRP radio, like KX2 that Tom showed you, is a QRP, a low power radio. It's also very, really power efficient. So it would last a long time. So I would ask yourself, do you really need more than 5 watts of transmit power? And if you do, that's fine. You can, you know, install a mobile radio instead. But here's the difference that you'll see. So handhelds, okay, this is receive power, or this UV 5R valve thing, 3.2 watts, this AC 2 watts. You know, you get to the mobile radio like this IC7100, 12 watts. So, you know, multiple times more power consumption during receive, and of course base station that much more. On transmit, of course, it depends on the power you're transmitting with. Take note that the power efficiency, you never get better than maybe 50% at the best. So maybe 30 to 50% kind of range. So if you're transmitting with power of 5 watts, you can count on needing 10 to 15 watts of DC power input into the radio. So you want to factor that in with the power budget if you plan when you know, plan the battery system. This is an example with a lead acid battery, and this is a 100 amp hour battery. This thing would, well, that weighs 59 pounds, that would be huge. We use this mobile radio. Okay, these are the receive and transmit current levels, and only drain the battery to 50% because that's what they recommend with lead acid if you want it to last a long time. And what I calculate is you can listen for 60 hours. Talk for 2.6 hours, and actually it's less than that because you're draining the battery. I'll talk more about that in a second. Blood acid battery, the capacity actually drops. If you assume a 5% transmit due where you're listening 95%, talking 5% of the time, that battery will last you 28 hours. But just to give you an idea. So what battery to use? As you know, there are all different battery chemistries out there. It's like Baskin Robbins with 35 flavors, you know, what on earth are you gonna choose? These in orange are all lithium ion chemistries. LCO, the lithium cobalt oxide, that's what's most common in cell phones, computers. NMC, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide. That's typically used in electric vehicles and power tools. So those are really the most common. They're also the ones that are famous for catching fire. I'm going to talk a lot about lithium iron phosphate here. This is one that's becoming very popular. Ham radio and other hobbyists. It's a much safer formulation. And remind me, I meant to show you a video before I got started on this. Remind me at the end, I got a video showing what happens when you put a nail through an NMC battery. What happens when you drive a nail through a lithium iron phosphate battery. This one catches fire rather explosively. This one just sat there. The lithium iron phosphate is really much safer, but you don't get as much power per weight. So there's a penalty in weight. You get many charge-discharge cycles. They've rated at about 2,000 charge-discharge cycles, going from 0% to 100%, 0 to 100. You can make use of the entire range. If you limit it, go between 20 and 80%, maybe you get 4,000 or 5,000 cycles out of it. So it's a long lifespan. And then there's lead acid, used in car batteries. And these are rather expensive, but you know, they work well. They don't recommend using the full capacity though. That's something to keep in mind. If you want them to last a long time, they generally recommend not discharging below 50%. With a deep discharge battery, realistically push it down to 20%. So 20 back up to 100 and 20 back up to 100. You know, I think we'll get 300 cycles out of it. Compared to full charge discharge cycles with the lithium phosphate. So the battery capacitor C is measured in watt-hours, and you can express the charge or discharge rate in terms of C. So C over 20 is the rate in inches. If you discharge it for 20 hours, 20 amp hours divided by 20 hours, you're ending up with your rate of current will drain the battery over a 20-hour period. For a 100 amp hour battery, if you drain it for 5 amps, it should last 20 hours. And lead acid batteries are actually rated according to the C over 20 rate. They become much less efficient if you drain them faster. The total charge in the battery is simply related to the chemical reaction. And so I would think that the total charge you get out of the battery should be under how fast you do it with the charge, in other words, the current rate. And that is neat how it works with the lithium batteries. Lead acid is different. We'll talk about that in a second. You actually end up with less capacity the more rapidly you drain. The voltage should simply be related to the observation of reduction potential. There should be a fixed voltage. And that is how the lithium batteries work. They stay at a constant voltage for a long time until they finally give out. Lead acid batteries are much more complicated. So with lithium battery, if you have a 10 amp hour battery and you drain it for 1 hour, you can go 10 amps. It should last that full hour is what I'm getting at. If you drain it at 20 amps, it should go for half an hour. So it's linear. It should get the full charge out of it. Now, of course, there's some internal resistance in the battery, so there's going to be some voltage drop no matter what the battery chemistry, based on the rate at which you drive. The faster you drain the battery, the more inefficient it becomes, because proportionately you're turning some of the energy to keep that internal resistance of the battery. But the way I look at this, it doesn't really matter what the power is, as long as the voltage is high enough to keep the battery on. What you really are interested in is how long will the battery last putting out that current rate before it finally gives out. And so with the lithium iron phosphate, the curves look like this. It's pretty much constant voltage until the very end. Drop. And when does the radio cut out? Well, I looked up the manufacturer, I'll say 13.8 volts plus or minus 15%. That's what the input voltage should be. That's 11.7 to 15.9 volts. Well, that's not all that useful, but it's certainly total. Because the radio will still work at 11.7 volts. Now, what does it actually cut out? 11 volts, 10.5 volts, and nobody will tell you. I think you could probably get away with going down to 11 volts. So if we were to go back to this curve, you have 4 batteries in series, so 2.5 volts per battery. That would be 10 volts right there. 11 volts would be in between here. It says 12 volts. So somewhere in here is where I would think the battery would cut out. Rather than radio. Lead acid batteries are very different. They're at rest, voltage looks like this. It's not, a fixed voltage. And that has to do with battery chemistry. Apparently, there are side reactions that are occurring. So it gets very complicated. And then this chart shows, the current versus voltage that you get, discharge rates. And the reason I'm showing you this is to show that as the rate of discharge goes up, the battery becomes less and less efficient. You're actually getting less charge out of it. If it was only a 3 or 4% difference, I wouldn't bother you with this, but it's actually a profound difference. So the batteries are rated at silver 20. So, we're assuming 1.5 hour battery. Should get 5 amps out of it. And you will get 20 hours out of a new battery. So that's 100% of what you expect to get. Now you go twice as fast. Well, instead of lasting 10 hours, you get 28 hours, just getting most of it out. What happens when you go to 100 amps? You're going at the same current flow as the rating, 100 amp hours, you bring it in 100 amps. You would think it should last an hour. It actually only lasts 35 minutes. So, you're losing about 40% of your actual capacity by draining quickly. And then it gets worse from there. So the point of that is, I would recommend that you use as big a battery as you can, carry around. So what I recommend is, whatever your radio transmit current is, plus whatever the amperage of your various accessories are, add all that together, that's your maximum current draw rate. I would in a battery that's at least that big in terms of its capacity. In other words, if you think you're gonna need 12 amps as the most, I would recommend getting a battery that's rated at 12 amp hours or higher. So you don't get into that, inefficiency problem. The lithium iron phosphate batteries, most of the manufacturers actually stipulate that you shouldn't discharge them faster than a 1C rate anyway. So that's kind of my recommendation. If we can go higher, twice as high, so much the better. It'll last that much longer. Not just twice as long, but that drop off at the end. It's less of a steep drop off. It'll last even longer than twice as long and double the size of the battery. So that's a lot of detail about batteries, but that was some relevant information. These are examples of some lithium iron phosphate batteries that I've got up front here. They're not cheap, but they last a long time. And again, you can go from 100% down to 0. You're not limited to 20, only going down to 20%. If you do the math, they're actually more cost effective in the long run. That said, there's nothing wrong with going with a lead acid battery, whether it's AGM or gel or what have you. It's a technology we're familiar with. We've been using in cars for over 100 years. They work, but they are heavier. They don't last as long. But maybe that's fine for your particular application. You're only going to use it once in a while. You don't care, but you can charge and discharge 2,000 times. Lead acid may be just fine. These batteries have a battery management system built in, so they can balance the cells inside. So they're a little more finicky in that regard, but they work well with a good battery management system built in. Another consideration, what if you want to take your goat cut in an airplane? So the rules stipulate you're not allowed a single battery that's rated at more than 100 watt hours of capacity. So that's a unit of energy, actually, watt hours. So at 12 volts, that would correspond to an 8.3 amp hour battery. TSA will let you on the plane if it's bigger than that. You can negotiate with them. There is actually some leeway with that for special applications. When you have a CPAP machine that has a bigger battery, they'll probably let you on board with it, but there are some rules about that. No, that's per battery. So this, for example, is a 3 amp hour battery. This would be allowed. You can carry 3 or 4 of these on the plane, and if they're all fully charged, connect them in parallel and get your capacity back that way. But I would say there are no guarantees. This is TSA. They see a whole bunch of lithium batteries on there. And on the label, it's up to them. I would recommend if you're going to try to carry a go kit on the plane, carry a letter with you with the rules, the actual for the federal regulations, so you can point out to them what the rules are. Okay. Battery end of life is typically designated as when the battery gets to 80% of its capacity when new. That's considered done. The battery should be replaced. Okay, so here are some examples. What is the actual cost, the weight? What am I looking at here? So I just took 3 of the cheapest batteries I could find online. This is lithium NMC, so that's a very common type. That was actually hard to find. The lithium iron phosphate are all over the place. That's been a change over the last few years. These are really becoming popular for good reason. And then AGM lead acid batteries. That's absorbent glass mat. That's what people will recommend, or the gel cell, something of that nature. A sealed lead acid battery. You don't want to be carrying sulfuric acid sloshing around inside your battery. So we recommend, gel or AGM or something like that. Okay, so these are all rated at 12 amp hour, all 12 volt. The lithium iron phosphate weighs 1.5 kilograms, so just over 3 pounds. The lithium NMC weighs 1.25 kilograms, so 83% as much. So yes, the lithium iron phosphate is heavier, but it's much safer. You can go through many more charge discharge cycles. I personally would recommend this over that one. And then compared to AGM, this is a lead acid battery, it weighs more than twice that this one weighs. For the same capacity, again, you're limited to 20 to 100%. So you're not really getting the whole capacity out. And I did a calculation of you using this particular mobile radio, receive a half an amp, transmit a 10 amps, 5% transmit duty cycle. This one would last you 12.3 hours, 8 hours for this one. Okay, what if it's a 50% duty cycle? Your net controller, and you're talking a lot. Then it's 2.3 hours for these two, 1.3 hours for that one. Just to give you an idea of what kind of duration you might expect. And yeah, so then I did that calculation. That's supposed to be 50% duty cycle. No, that's not. No, both 5% duty cycle. This is lithium iron phosphate versus lead acid. And you get an idea with the handhelds, you can go for over a day. This one more than 2 days. No, sorry, not quite. It'd be like a day and a half. But then you get into a mobile radio, you're kind of talking about 6.8 hours. Okay, 3.5 hours with the lead acid battery. So again, I put the question to you: how badly do you need more than 5 watts to transmit power? A veteran 10 out of keeps using more power, right? If you like, you can put both an handheld and a mobile radio inside your Go kit. And just plan on using the handheld most of the time, but if you need more power, switch over to the mobile radio. That would be an option. Now, what about under voltage problems? In other words, you know, when the voltage drops too low, your radio cut out. You know, what can you do to prevent that? Okay, well, you know, for one thing, use heavy gauge wire. I would recommend using 10 gauge copper wire for your connections. That's the maximum you can use in a standard Anderson power pole. So these plugs that you were seeing back there that look like this, Anderson power poles, the largest wire that they will take is 10 gauge. Every time you put a fuse in line, you're going to lose about 1/10 of a volt at the rated current. So just use the fuses you need. Don't be carried away to have multiple fuses and switches and things in between your battery and the radio. You'll introduce voltage drops every time you do that. You can use a larger battery again. Point at which it starts to drop off will be later using a larger battery. They make these battery boosters that will take a lower voltage and convert it to a higher voltage using, switching power supply technology, so you can get more time out of your battery. That nice Go kit I showed you earlier, the person who built that highly recommends these things. He said, well, after a few hours, the voltage drops like 11 volts, and by the time you get to 10 volts, the radio loses its settings, and it's a big pain. So he likes these things. To me, they make me nervous. I think this would be a great way to kill your battery. Batteries really don't like being drained all the way to zero. And if you go to zero and then keep trying to drain them, you can actually ruin a battery, whether it's lead acid or lithium. So I would, consider putting that in your kit. But they make me nervous. And be very careful about it and not overdo it with the battery boosters. Okay, so how do you distribute the power in your radio? I really like this thing here. This is made by West Mountain Radio. got with the price, I think it's around $120. This is a great power distribution device that will manage your battery, your power supply. In other words, your AC to DC power supply that you would use to charge your battery. That goes here. Your battery that goes here, out to everything else, your radio and accessories is right here. You can connect a solar panel right here, and this thing manages all of that. And in fact, if you lose your power supply, the power cuts out, it will instantaneously switch to the battery. I've been using this for a few years at home and it works great. I've actually tried it. You know, it's made me a little nervous to hold the power plug on, you know, but it worked fine. You know, the radio just stayed on and it switches back quickly. It also, you can set it to, so it will charge lithium iron phosphate batteries specifically. So it's got the proper voltages and settings, or AGM batteries. You can, you know, tell it to do either one. With solar, it will take the solar and charge your batteries with it. It'll probably take the solar and actually feed your radio too, although I couldn't determine for sure in the manual if it really does that, but it certainly will use that to charge your batteries. It will manage that as well. It has what's called maximum power point tracking, so that it will most efficiently match the voltage current curve of your solar panels. We're getting the most power out of your solar panels, so we take that and adjust it to the maximum power input into your battery. That's maximum power point tracking. All of that's built into this one device. It's pretty slick. I would recommend it. You can bring a solar panel with you. This is a nice one that holds up. It's 50 watts. It's quite portable. Put a couple of leads together, parallel, make 100 watts. And you know, put that then into that power management system. I don't recommend connecting a solar panel directly to your battery. As long as the solar, you know, wouldn't like connecting the entire solar array on your roof to a small battery, it might really overwhelm it. I have way too much inrush currents, but if you had a 100 watt solar panel on one of these batteries, you could say half charge. I think you can get away with it, but you run the risk of overcharging your battery, and that's a good way to ruin these batteries. The open circuit voltage on a 12 volt solar panel is 18 volts. When it's under load, it will be in 12, 16 volt kind of range. But the open circuit voltage is 18 volts. So as the battery's charging, it'll approach 18 volts. That's way too much for these batteries. They will run. So I really wouldn't do that. But also the solar panels, they're diodes. And at night, when there's no power, they actually allow current to flow backwards and will discharge your battery at night. So I would never hook up solar panels directly to your battery. Do it through a charge, proper solar charge controller like this. It will manage all of that for you. And then, as you saw, there are these power distribution panels that serve the same function as your utility panel at home, with uses, they're appropriately sized for whatever accessory you're using. So that's definitely a good idea. This is what it might look like, or what you saw in the examples back there. You can put in one of these multimeters that will show you the voltage, the current, the amount of power that's been consumed, and energy over time, watt hours. Gives you all that information. This is a nice one. They advertise that they only have a 0.05 voltage drop across this, so you're not having too much of a voltage drop. It'd be a nice way to keep track of what's going on in your radio, so when you're building, so you get an idea of where things stand. Are you really having enough voltage? Have you consumed a lot of power at this point? Should the battery be about that? Okay, what about fuses? Okay, as we saw in Tom's movie, that there's a fuse right next to the battery positive terminal. That is the standard way we do it. The reason for that is that the load, in this case, your radio, the case is grounded. Your car, the chassis is grounded to negative. So if anything bad is going to happen, it's tend to be on the positive side. Or if the wire frays, as Tom was intimating, and touches the car chassis, it'll short out. So you want to fuse on the positive side to prevent that. So that's the standard thing. Now, probably seen recommendations when you're doing a car installation. They'll tell you, oh, you have to have a fuse on the positive as well as the negative. And I've never understood how that sort of research it. And this is what's going on. Okay, so here's your setup. You have a radio, and what they used to recommend is that you connect the radio directly to the battery. One reason for that is that the battery is like a giant capacitor. It's very noise free. You know, if there's radio frequency noise to the alternator or whatever, computers and things in your car. But when it gets to the battery, that's really damped out because it's like a giant capacitor. So one reason to connect directly to the battery is to have less noise. Also less voltage drops and other problems, you know, between the battery and whatever you're tying into. So what they used to recommend is this kind of a connection. Okay. And now you install an antenna on your car. Not with a mag mount. A mag mount is capacitively coupled, so it's isolated electrically. But if you actually, you know, have like an NMO mount on your car, now the outer conductor of the coax is tied to the car chassis. Okay, so now you have established an electrical connection to the car chassis. And this is what can happen if the battery ground strap fails. Okay, so if it corrodes, it comes loose. This is what, so normally what happens is, you know, the other stuff in your car, the single biggest load being the starter motor, the current should do this, right? It goes from the battery to the motor through the solenoid, and then back through the car chassis, back through the ground strap, back to the battery. And what if this happens? The ground strap fails. Well, now the motor and everything in your car is looking for a pathway back to the battery. What's going to find is going to go through the car chassis. It's going to find your antenna over here. It's going to come down the coax through the radio and back to the battery. That's obviously a bad situation. And that's the reason for putting a fuse on the negative side if you're going to attach to a car. Now, oh yeah, here's a voice of experience. I think this was a good quote. It was pounded into me when I was both when I was in the Navy and later as a ham. You only use the hot side unless you're installing a radio with an antenna that with grounding strap being loose or cause your coax to be the ground for the connection. Okay. So unless you're doing this, you don't need the negative fuse. Okay, well, things have changed. Now cars all have battery management systems. And actually measure the currents going in and out of your battery. That's typically located on a negative terminal of the battery. And so if you were to connect your radio directly to the battery, you're bypassing that sensor and you can confuse the battery management system. I tried looking this up. I couldn't get all the details on how these systems work. And part of what they're doing is what's called coulomb counting, where it's actually measuring the charge going in and out of the battery. But as we've looked at, you're having more or less capacity depending on how rapidly you're draining the battery. So that's not going to be a perfect measure of the state of charge of your battery. So I suspect what it's doing is at rest. It's looking at the voltage of the battery, determining, okay, this is the state of charge. And then when the car's being used, it's doing full-on counting to, see what's happening. Approximately your battery right at 100%. Well, if you attach here, you're bypassing that, and you run the risk of either overcharging or having your battery run dead by doing that. So nowadays, and this is a chart from the WRL, I recommend attaching to the positive terminal like before with a fuse, but then attached to the car chassis as near where the battery attaches as possible. Okay. So now, my question is, do you need this fuse anymore? I'm not sure that you do. I Googled, I saw somebody else who made the same comment. What's the point of this fuse? The ground strap fails, well, so what? The battery's gonna fail too. Then your radio's gonna fail too, along with everything else. There's not a pathway, through the negative terminal of your radio to back to the battery. So I would argue you don't actually need that negative fuse anymore. But there's a new problem that you hooked it up this way now. Now this is your alternator. You look at your ground strap, you can have what's called a load dump transient, where all of a sudden the alternator shoots the voltage up because it's lost its load. That's the battery. And you get hundreds of volts spike. I was also reading that most modern alternators come with Xenon dials that will plant the voltage. So this now gets down into the weeds. I would personally think one of the need is the fuse on the positive end of the battery. Let's move on. Oh, okay. If you plan to use the car battery, what I would do is have a place to plug in for the battery on your Go kit, but just have one spot to plug in and out so you don't put batteries in parallel by mistake. I would not recommend putting your battery, especially this lithium iron phosphate with who knows what state of charge, in parallel with your car battery at the same time. You're likely to get a large commercial current one direction or the other. That's not going to be good for the battery. But so I would recommend only using one battery or the other. And carry a spare battery with you, do the same thing. In the car, I would recommend, rather than using plants, which are going to have an iffy connection, actually install the Anderson Powerful with a positive fuse. As in the car, maybe you should do negative as well, just to be safe. Just have it installed, have an Anderson Powerful in your car to plug into. That'd be a slick way to do it. You can do this kind of thing. Maybe that's what putting in your Go, just sleeping up to somebody's random battery that I would only plug it in as the single battery. Don't put it in parallel with your battery. And this is what it next to the battery might look like. We have a fuse here on the positive end. I have two positives coming out, so there's two fuses, not on the negative. Okay. So I would recommend getting 10-gauge wire, cheaper if you buy in bulk. This stuff is pretty nice. It's tin, which actually makes it more erosion resistant than just plain copper. In a marine environment, you live on the coast, think about lighthouse navigations and whatnot. So marine grade wire is pretty nice. I recommend using good quality connectors. This is not the place to save money. An interesting experience. Meredith with one of her science fair projects, she was testing the continuation of radio waves through various building materials. So we had a transmit antenna. My job, I was the monkey pushing the push to talk like while she was taking measurements on the receiving end. And it was interesting. We had, I didn't even count the number of times we had a loose connection failure. And what was interesting about it is, I think most of the time you wouldn't even know it. You were just listening on the radio. What we commonly observed is maybe we're reading on the spectrum analyzer, she was getting negative 13.9 dBm. And then, okay, let's try it against another trial. Now it's negative 14.1 dBm. Okay, let's try it again. And suddenly it's negative 36.2 dBm. It's like, what on earth just happened? You know, did we hit a button? Did something go wrong? No, it was invariably was a loose connection. Okay, let's loosen the connections, tighten them all up, just go through the whole chain on the transmit and the receive side. Do it again. And it's back. It's negative 14 dBm. If you think about the chain of events that's going between transmitter and receive, you commonly have a whole bunch of lead lines. Now, the radio might be just putting out 10 watts of power. 30 dBm, I think. And then you got so much gain and so on. You know, maybe the radio on the receive side, negative 20. Well, with the typical sensitivity of a radio, you can go all the way down to negative 123 dBm. So if you're going from minus 20 to minus 40, which you know it, your radio doesn't get it. I suspect that this is happening to all of us all the time. We're losing 15, 20 dB just because the connection got a little loose and we don't know it. And during that experiment, there must have been 20 different times where we're, you know, tightening the connections again. It's interesting. So it sure showed up on the spectrum. It was obvious when it happened. So the take-home message is don't chintz out on the connector. Use good quality connectors. Frank mentioned silver plating. That makes for a great connector. Fuses. I mentioned before the deep blues, a 1/10 of a volt. Each time you have a fuse, you have a regular current. Apparently the ATC is a little better. It's sealed on the bottom. Something I didn't know before. You go online and you say, oh, now O stands for open and C stands for closed. Well, no, it doesn't, but that's a handy way to think of it. So maybe the ATC or blade fuses are a little better. Those are the ones made by Busman. Less likely to get water in them. This is an interesting option. So this is a circuit breaker designed for 12-volt systems. They come in all different sizes. This happens to be a 30-amp one. They're a little expensive, but it's nice, and then it has a built-in switch, so you can turn the whole thing on or off. It's going to be hard to find a switch really rated at the high current because most switches are rated at 3 amps or 6 amps or something like that. If your radio is going to draw 20 amps, that's not going to work. Then we're on to the switches that are rated for 120 volts. If you end up with half a volt voltage drop at its rated current, who cares? But at 12 volts, it becomes significant. When something like this, it's going to have a very small voltage drop, and it'll serve the function of the fuse. It blows, and you figure out what short circuit when your next
That's like being cheap.
So that's an interesting thought. If you want to do digital modes, you need a computer. You can bring your laptop with you, and that's fine. That's what most people do. But then your Go kit becomes okay. My Go kit plus I got to go find my laptop. If there's an event where the power's out, it's like okay, well, I got my Go kit. It's been charging the whole time, but how's my laptop? It's a 10% charge. So I wondered about something like this. They make these little computers. This is literally a computer that works off 12 volts. This one was $160. It's often as cheap as 127 with a little less memory. People on Amazon, they say these things work great. It's got Windows 11 Pro already installed. 4 USB, a couple HDMI ports on it, and it works on 12 volts. So how about just building a computer right into your Go Box? You would need a monitor. So I've got a 10-inch monitor here. This only uses 8 watts. This is 8 watts at idle, maybe 15 or 20 watts under load. Just a thought, and these are waterproof keyboard and mouse. So. Remarkably cheap when you have a computer right in your Go Box. Before you run out and do this, maybe let me test it. And this literally arrived yesterday, so I haven't had a chance to play with it. I want to make sure it really works. You can do things like install R on it and see how it works. But it should, from what I've read. It's not a bad idea to include an LED light source, you know, for nighttime. More options, you can put an AC to DC converter so you can charge your battery on site if you have AC power or a generator. If you want, you know, that fancy Go Box I showed you at the beginning gives an inverter installed so you can power AC equipment. I would definitely include a switch to turn it off if you don't need it. But it's an interesting option if you don't mind the extra weight. This will put out 300 watts pure sine wave, waves, you know, about 1.5 pounds. Something if you like. Noise suppression, microphone, manuals, need adapters, and you know, things to include. Diagnostic experiments. My lights are remarkably things, you know, to see how your antenna setup is working. Something that you might consider working with. I wondered about putting a pair of FRS radios if your Go Box is a bigger one, so that you could use one and a random helper could use one legally. And we gave them that way we use your amateur radios with others. Just the thoughts. These don't waver and what kind of a case are you going to use? A case with a handle, Pelican case, or whatever. Part on wheels, or as I mentioned earlier, how about a backpack of some sort? Some ideas. Antenna. Okay. If you're going to use a monopole, it's going to need a ground plane or radials. There are various antennas that don't require a ground plane, apparently, no lines, just like that. J poles, for example, do not need radials. A dipole where the lower limb is a tube where the coax feeds up the middle, that would be an option, or various collinear antennas. An antenna can be hung from a tree with really a lot of height. You could use a magnet antenna and a cookie sheet. Ideally, though, the radials should be a quarter wavelength long, or the might be even bigger than that. I found using an antenna analyzer, you use a small cookie sheet to plug your 2 meter and you know antenna in the middle of that. It doesn't tune up very well. The standing wave ratio tends to be kind of high because it's not big enough. It tends to work well with 70 centimeters, so you can use a bigger cookie sheet. If the Go Box is metal and big enough, it can serve as the ground plane. And obviously, a bigger mounted antenna is better than that, but in a pinch, maybe not so bad. You all remember the show Emergency from the 1970s? They had this thing called the biophone, where they just installed the antenna every time they used it. That's a real device. That is not just a movie prop. And that's what they obviously had a monopole antenna in this metal box or it's the ground plane. Radials don't necessarily have to be straight, they simply have to be, resonant. So, could you install radials inside your box and just make sure they're long enough that you've added, making curvatures and so on, that it's resonant. I want to play around with that idea, put a compact antenna on top, and have the whole thing just be like that biophone. That would be a compromise setup, but an expedient quick one. This is a J-pole antenna built in 680. That uses this with this Go Box and works great. This is a radial, system Not really very convenient, though those radios don't fold up, and I was thinking if we had one that would fold up, it might be a nice way to have, you know, your radios. These Slim Jim or J Pole antennas made with twin lead are nice. You can hang something like this up in a tree. So you can put that in the Go Box and then hardly any weight at all as an option. Okay, ventilation and weather resistance. You want a waterproof electric case that would certainly keep things nice and tight inside. But then, you know, there's poor ventilation, your radio puts out a lot of heat. You could get into multiple real problems if you're out using it in the summer on a given day, you close it up, put it in your basement, it gets cold, the temperature falls below the dew point, and the next thing you know, you've got mold and mildew inside. So if you do this, when you're storing it at home, I would just leave it cracked open. What about, okay, so how does your home do it? Well, you got a roof, keep the water out, with the motor design vents, and then you got added ventilation. So maybe something like that's a good idea for Go Box. You know, ventilation kind of like this, with one ventilation at the bottom, like hold air in, ventilation at the top to let it out. Something like that might work. And it's still that I showed you earlier. He simply puts the radio on top. So the heat sink is up there, so that radio should ventilate just fine. You can incorporate fans. Think about it, the radios do get hot. And you know, they'll shut down if they get too hot. This is an FTM ACU normal radio. Look at the heat sink. It's got a giant heat sink along the top. What about something like this? You put a hole in the back of the box and just mount the radio to the outside. So the heat is going straight to the outside. That would be an option. I got a little wild with my imagination thinking about this. You can make an aluminum casting that would match made up against your heat sink and mount back to your Go Box. So that's it. So that was a lot of stuff, a lot of detail. I don't need for any of this to sound intimidating. I was just sharing with you what I've learned, to give you a few ideas. It doesn't have to be that. If you think about it, the manufacturer has done 99% of the work for you. You know, the radio has just about everything you need already factored in. You just need a big enough battery with the proper fuse, the radio, and some sort of a decent antenna, and you're good to go. And then you can get more and more fancy with it if you like. I just wanted to give you some design engineering ideas. And you know, so what you're going to want to do is first of all figure out what kind of a Go Box you're interested in. You know, something, you know, like this, or something in a box, or you know, what do you want to do? Is it going to be HF, VHF, UHF? You know, what are you interested in? Are you going to just use a handheld, or are you going to install mobile? You know, figure out your parameters first. Okay, the design criteria, and then design. And I would spend quite a bit of time on the design part of it. You know, the measure twice, cut once idea. You know, plan out your layout. You know, where are things going to go? You don't want to cut holes and install something and realize, oh shoot, I don't have enough room for this, the rest of it. So, you know, spend some time on the design and then purchase the parts and have at it. What I envision we'll do here is I'll bring some tools. Anybody who's got tools, you know, I've got Anderson powerful printers, you know, various crimpers and saws and drills and stuff that we can bring here and we can build together. I'm guessing that we're probably not actually going to be ready to build yet next month. I'll go ahead and bring tools anyway. But what I'd be happy to do, I'm planning to come, you know, next month and the month after. I'll be here and we got all kinds of experience in the room. We can help you, you know, with the design process. You know, hey Dave, what do you think about this? Think this will work, what about that? You know, we can help you with that and then we can help you with the actual building. And I think, you know, I've been wanting to make it for myself since forever. You know, I think this would be a lot of fun. I don't know that we'll get it done in the next 2 months, but that's okay. I mean, however long it takes, it's gonna be a continual project. So that's what I have. Lots of stuff. Not yet, but I'll make it that way. This was finished literally.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So, okay, so next month, same bat time, same bat channel. Phase 2 will be designed and discussed, and maybe anybody who wants to do it, start getting your parts together. And then the third November is when we would, any potential meeting to be filled.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think that's a good way to do it. And if we need to, and I suspect we will, it can continue beyond that too. That all sounds good. And I wanted to bring up, Jonathan, maybe the club ought to invest in some bulk art. Requiring to use 3 feet of it. Maybe the club could purchase it at a bulk price rate, and then you can purchase it from us at cost. And that, and some powerful connectors and this and that. You know, I think that may not be a bad idea.
Yeah. Good idea. You know, I was also thinking, so I wonder if somebody knows what you're gonna say. That, you know, when they accomplish those batteries, would they be willing to donate to, let's say, electric radio club and, you know, really have that. It's really fun. I wonder if there's someone with the call in for DC that knows anything. You know, TSA. Yeah, I mean, as club president, I could reach out to TSA. That's close. I don't know if that doesn't get discounted lunch. Well, that's great. So, Dave, thank you very much. Great information there. A lot of food for thought. Why don't we, if we could, on the few remaining minutes, get whatever food you want, and then we'll pack up and,